Good evening, sophomores. First of all, I just basically forgot about the whole Zoom meeting thing on Monday. I forgot that I was going to do that. Uh, so I apologize for that. What I am going to do, however, is make myself available uh, tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday from uh, little or around 7 to around 8. I can send you I'll post a notification on that I'm available, and it'll be through that link that you'll see uh, in Google Classroom. So if you have any questions or anything you don't really want to email, or if you haven't turned in some assignments and you need some help with those, I'll be available at those times. So from around 7 to 8, Wednesday and Thursday. So tomorrow and the day after. All right. Today we're going to finish up this part on the sacraments in kind of a hurried way. And I'm going to start on a life of prayer. I'm going to get through some of that, then we're going to stop. Then I'm going to post another video on probably Thursday, finishing up this part on prayer, but also adding some stuff of my own, or not of my own. Where's that book? I'm gonna cover the first, or kind of give a summary of a little bit of the first chapter of this book, The Art of Praying. It's by Romano Guardini. This guy's awesome. Unfortunately, he's dead, but he was Pope Benedict XVI's teacher. He's Italian, but he was raised in Germany, and he has written some of probably 2 of my top 10 favorite books. So he's really good. All right, so we're on to holy orders. All right, when Jesus called the 12 apostles and made Peter the rock, the head of the apostles, he constituted what we call the office of the church. In other words, the apostolic college, the successors of whom are the bishops in union with the Pope. And that was the start of church hierarchy. Now, wait a second, I thought I wrote that definition somewhere. I'm sure I'll find it. So that was the start of the church hierarchy. And in the New Testament era, this developed into 3 degrees. The hierarchy of the church has kind of 3 different degrees, but also this coincides with the sacrament of holy orders. So we have the episcopate, which is refers to the bishop, presbyteriate, which refers to priests, and the diaconate, which are deacons. Now these 3 ministries are essential for the life of the church. And I mean, they're not. Well, one reason why they're essential is because without them, there would be no sacraments, and there would be no church. It would kind of just be more of a free-for-all. I don't know if that saying really makes that much sense to use it there. Anyway, all right. And these ministries, of the episcopate, presbyteriate, and diaconate, they're all conferred in the sacrament of holy orders. Now, confer, I want to go through that to quote Mr. Webster. aka the dictionary. To confer means to bestow from or as from a position of superiority, and to give something such as a property or characteristic to someone or something. Now, so these ministries are conferred in the sacrament of holy orders. Also, all this can be seen as a fulfillment and not simply a continuation, but a fulfillment of the priesthood of Aaron and the Levites, which we see in the Old Testament. So this sacrament is called holy orders, but the rite is called ordination. Now, a rite is, I think, as we've covered, it's basically a governing the words or actions of a ceremony. Now, it was called an ordination. That's after that was named after, or that term is derived from the Roman term ordo, which particularly a governing body. So Jesus conferred on the apostles grace and authority. So like that marked their being. He gave them that characteristic. And so he gave them the power and the obligation to baptize, forgive sins, anoint with oil, and to celebrate the Eucharist. Now we're at the bottom of page 208, or close to the bottom. Now, conferral of the sacraments, that's central to the ministry of holy orders. In other words, that's one of their primary responsibilities is to celebrate the sacraments. And given that the apostles couldn't be there for every single Christian, because we know after Pentecost happened, thousands were converting to Christianity. So, even though it wasn't called Christianity at that time. So the apostles chose men to be even bishops, I think, to help them. So Saint Stephen, he was the first Christian martyr. He was chosen to be one of the first deacons, and he and Saint Paul set forth some personal qualities that were kind of looked upon as being essential for this ministry. So for those who would be bishops, priests, and deacons, which we're going to get to soon. So this sacrament consecrates a man to serve God in the sacramental ministry of the church. And through it, bishops and priests are given the mission and faculty to act in persona Christi. Now that's a very important phrase, in persona Christi, which means in the person of Christ. So like when you, for example, when you go to confession, and you are talking to the priest, well, you're not simply talking to the priest. The priest is acting in persona Christi. So he's, in other words, Christ is acting through him. Because the priests don't really, just as human persons, they don't have, some ability to forgive sins. That power is God's. But since God granted them authority to do so, it's like that power is, how am I explaining this? I have no idea what I was saying. Clean canteen time. Yeah, so the priests are acting in the person of Christ when forgiving sins. and I think I'm pretty sure through with the rest of the sacraments as well. And deacons were given the strength to serve the people of God through the liturgy. Through the liturgy, the word, and charity. Excuse me. I think one of the primary goals or activities of deacons in the beginning was to read the gospel during the liturgy of the word, and so that's why, like, if you have a deacon at your parish, that's why the deacon is always going to read the gospel. He may not always give the homily, but he usually always reads the gospel if the deacon is present. All right, now we got the characteristics, or the characters of ecclesial ministry. So it's marked by 3 characters. Now we're bottom of page 208. So we've got the character of service. And I'll just go ahead and read this. Since the ordained are servants of the faithful who, in the course of being slaves for Christ and acting as ministers of the word and grace that are not their own, freely become the slaves of all. In other words, they need to be very willing and ready to serve. You're not going to be an effective priest, bishop, or deacon if you do not wish to serve others. In fact, like I think I may have brought this up before. It was either Elizabeth Johnson or what is her name? Elizabeth Fiorenza Schuster, or something like that. Both of them are like these feminist theologians, are a little out there, to say the least. They're a bit heretical as well. But one of them used to be like or heavily support the one of them used to be very pro women priests, so they wanted to have women serve as priests, and I don't know when it was. It was probably, like, I want to say recently, but it probably wasn't really all that recent. Probably in the early 2000s. One of them, or the one who was like really for women priests, she kind of took back her statement or she changed positions because she realized that being a priest wasn't really a position of power. It was more of a position of service. And from that, she concluded that we shouldn't have priests anyway, or at all, which is whatever. That doesn't make enough sense to really respond against. Okay, then there's the collegial character. Here's where okay, so first of all, collegial means marked by power or authority vested equally in each of a number of colleagues. It's also a sharing of authority. So now we're on the top of page 209. So the collegial character, bonded in a fraternal unity at the service of the faithful, priests serving collegially among the presbyterate, deacons serving collegially among the diaconate, each under the direction of their bishops, and bishops serving collegially with one another and with the successor to St. Peter. That reflects and witnesses the communion of the Trinity. So basically they're all sharing that like one authority and power granted to them. And I know I just said that woman, I want to say it was Elizabeth Johnson, but I can't remember for sure. She said it wasn't really a position of power. It was position of service. Well, I don't think it's a contradiction to say that that it's a position of power and service. It's like you have the power to serve. Like oftentimes, I think we oversimplify the role of power, or what it means to have power. We think of only how it will benefit a person, and we don't really think of the necessity to serve for those who have power. It's like if you have power, that means you have a responsibility to serve. Like, end of story. And we see that with Christ to the full. I mean, he himself said, I came to serve, not to be served. Okay, then a personal character. In that they were personally called by Christ to this life of service and must bear personal witness to fulfill the mission they have been given by Christ. So, I mean, they've got to personally witness to Christ. It can't just be all. I don't want to put. They have to have a relationship with Christ. Like, if it wouldn't really make much sense to be a priest if you didn't have a personal relationship with Christ. So I think that's actually pretty simple. Now, if someone is discerning priesthood, he enters into the seminary, and that's like a school for being a priest or for becoming a priest. If accepted, they go through a process of education and formation. I think like psychological tests that they have to pass. Anyway, so the seminarian will first become a deacon. They'll receive Sacrament of Holy Orders to become a deacon, and then they'll receive that next degree to become a priest. But I mean, if you have any questions about this, I'm sure you'll be able to ask them all to Father Ty next year, because he knows this stuff inside and out, as he should. All right, so the Sacrament of Holy Orders, or in the Sacrament of Holy Orders, the bishop lays his hands on the one receiving the sacrament, called the ordinand. So the one receiving the Sacrament of Holy Orders is known as the ordinand. And so when the bishop does that, the bishop also prays that God will pour out his Holy Spirit and the gifts of the Spirit that will be needed for the ordinand's ministry. The ordained deacon, priest, or bishop is enabled to act in the person of Christ, shepherd and bridegroom of his church. Then we've got a quote from the Catechism. The Sacrament of Holy Orders is conferred by the laying on of hands, followed by a solemn prayer of consecration asking God to grant the ordinand the graces of the Holy Spirit required for his ministry. Ordination imprints an indelible sacramental character. So indelible, to say something is indelible means, I'm pretty sure, it means like it can't be washed off. It's like it's permanent. All right, now on to matrimony. I apologize, but I'm just gonna skim through this. Matrimony is a beautiful sacrament. Man and a woman, they become one flesh. And what's different about the sacrament of matrimony is that the man and the woman participating in it are the ones who enact the sacrament. It's not so much, how am I forgetting this? It's not like they're receiving the sacrament from the priest, but like they're the ones enacting it. So marriage, it's ordained from the beginning, to be sacramental. And so let's think about what that means. Well, it means, to be an image of God. Like the idea of marriage definitely has changed over time, like without a doubt. So in the Old Testament, you'll see that some of the key figures, they had multiple wives, or concubines. David, I think, had some concubines, um, and a few wives at least. I can't remember how many. So that had not yet been incorporated, or the idea of one man and one woman had not really been incorporated yet. But as we see in the New Testament, Christ clarified that this is one man, one woman. Once you're married to someone, you become one flesh with that person. And so if you were to be married, then get divorced and remarry, you're actually committing adultery, because that first, you're one flesh with that person regardless of what happens. And so then you're kind of breaking that commitment by joining with another. Now, one thing I do want to comment on, and this is kind of, maybe it's speculation, but I think it's more educated speculation, if I may say so. The sacrament of matrimony is extremely profound, and I suspect that, like, the significance that it bears, well, let me start over. I suspect that the reason why the church seems to have, like, such specific guidelines for the living out of each person's sexuality, like only seeing marriage as only between a man and a woman, and like the idea of not supporting contraception, the idea of always being open to life, the idea of chastity and purity of heart. I think that at least one reason why all of this is such a big deal is because of just how profound marriage is. At least that's my suspicion. Because, if you think about it, okay, you say you get married, so you're united to this person until death do you part. You're committed to loving this person, and St. Paul says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Well, how did Christ show his love for the church? He died for the church. A gruesome death. So, ideally, you get married, you love your spouse so much that you're willing to die for him or her. Yet, or I guess furthermore, when you consummate that marriage through the sexual act, your love is, first of all, that's what's bringing you together. And then from that love, you're potentially bringing forth another human being into existence. So you would be the fruit of your parents' love for each other. Like, that is really such an amazingly profound thing, to actually bring forth another human being. So I suspect that like the reason, like if I don't know if some of you are, kind of in a more rebellious stage, like, why does the church have all these rules about sexuality and stuff? Like, well, I really think it's because of just how profound and sacramental marriage and sex is. That's my suspicion. I mean, it's like we're not only images of God as individuals, but you can actually see an image of God within marriage and the family as well. Because if you get into Trinitarian theology, or the theology of the Trinity, so you have the Father and the Son, and the bond of love between those two is the Holy Spirit. And so it's like with a husband and a wife, their bond of love ends up being their children, which is it's really quite amazing. Unfortunately, though, you have a lot of marriages in today's age that that don't last. And that's unfortunate that not all of us can say that that image of God is clearly seen in their life or in one's life. So that's definitely an unfortunate thing. All right, now we're on to page 211. So we've got some good stuff from JP2, or Saint JP2. So prayer, first of all, it's the raising of one's mind and heart to God, or the request of good things from God. Now, through prayer, God forms, teaches, guides, consoles, and blesses us. So you cannot live an authentic Christian life if you're not praying. And I mean like daily prayer. Like it's supposed to be nourishing to us. It's supposed to be something that gives us life and that brings us closer to God. It's not supposed to be like a daily chore or anything like that, or something to check off your to-do list. Like it should be the focal point. And that's something that I personally have to work on more. It's tough because it's like the more you know, like the more you learn about this stuff, the more you realize how sinful you are. Which I guess it really isn't funny. It's actually kind of sad. But it is. It's knowledge gives you a lot of responsibility. So I mean that's something that I have to continue to work on. But a good example for that would be like Mother Teresa and her nuns. So I'm pretty sure that she would they out the day with prayer and adoration, I believe. So they would go to adoration, and she wouldn't let them leave until they had like a smile on their face, because it's really important to be joyful when you go about serving. You don't want to go to a soup kitchen and act like you have better things to do. Like that's kind of an insult to those you're serving. Be joyful about what you're doing, and it's good to it's really important to remember that too. Like it's a joyful thing. It isn't just a obligation or responsibility that we have to serve each other. It should be a cause for joy. So St. JP2 described the nature of prayer. Now this is a longer quote. It says, "Prayer is commonly held to be a conversation. In a conversation, there is always an I or a we. and a thou or you. In this case, the thou is with a capital T. If at first the I seems to be the most important element in prayer, prayer teaches that the situation is actually different. The thou is more important to God. So first of all, that's just absolutely fantastic. You could also think about it like this. There's a big difference between speaking with someone and speaking to someone. When you're speaking to someone, you're not really concerned about what the other person is saying. It's like the focal point is on what you are saying to them. But when you're speaking with someone, that's a conversation. Like that's a dialogue. That's something that requires both speech and listening. And in this speaking with, the most important person, or the most important element of that, is the other person, which is God. It continues, in prayer then, the true protagonist is God. The protagonist is Christ, who constantly frees creation from slavery to corruption and leads it toward liberty for the glory of the children of God. The protagonist is the Holy Spirit, who comes to the aid of our weakness. We begin to pray, believing that it is our own initiative that compels us to do so. Instead, we learn that it is always God's initiative within us. Just as St. Paul has written, this initiative restores in us our true humanity. It restores in us our unique dignity. This reminds me of something that's a little off topic, but I think it's worth saying, worth getting into. So, when I was reading this book called The Gulag Archipelago, right here, by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, he said something really interesting that I thought was actually quite profound at one point. See if I can remember this correctly. I can't exactly remember the pretense for it, like the reason or the greater context for which he said it, but he was saying something like how it's important to pursue virtue. And by the way, like the whole context of this book is the plot line, I guess. This book is he's writing about the prison camps and work camps in Soviet Union under Stalin, which killed tens of millions of people, tens of millions of Soviets, and was just so extremely unjust and terrible that it's hard to put into words. So he was commenting on I think he was saying how imprisonment, for those who are put in prison, can be a path to salvation. It's because you're faced with such an evil, sinful reality. It wasn't uncommon for the reaction of the person to grow all the more in virtue and to pursue the good and pursue God all the more. And I think he was saying how what was he saying? I just remember him saying that he raised a possible objection to what he was saying about the prison guards who were committing these terrible crimes, this ruthless treatment of people, killing people just in the most baseless way, like treating people like garbage, like literally. Not even like giving them so-called dignified death, I guess. And he was, so like, what would their punishment be? Because they seem to just be excelling and gaining more goods and stuff like that. And he said, well, the punishment is doing that because they're actually, to commit such an act, you're actually losing your humanity, or losing a piece of your humanity, which I thought was a really profound statement. But again, I apologize for that. Unfortunately, I can't remember it more specifically. All right, so the central theme of prayer is meditation on the life and mysteries of Christ. So by meditating on the life and mysteries of Christ, we get to know Jesus. We start to love him more and be united to him. And that's really the essence of the Rosary, at least in its given format. Because I know I had you create your own that wasn't necessarily focused on Christ, because I opened up to the Old Testament as well. But like the joyful mysteries, the sorrowful mysteries, the glorious mysteries, and the luminous mysteries, like those are all meditations on the life of Christ. And so I think that's a fantastic way to really grow in your prayer life. But also, Jesus teaches us how to pray. You know, he gave us the Our Father. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. So, I mean, this is the prayer that Christ taught us. It's the essence, basically, of the it's like it sums up the Gospels. Like, by reflecting on the Our Father, you really see like the essential things that we should be pursuing, that we should be doing, and that we should be praying for. It's okay. So Our Father. First two words, you can start reflecting on that. We're not just praying to some higher power. We're not just praying to our Creator, praying to our Father. So our God is a Father to us. Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Oh, we should have gone through Teresa of Avila's Way of Perfection. For that, sorry. All right, we'll stop there. We'll finish up. So just read pages. Jeez, all this is really important. We only have so much time. At least read pages 211 through 216. All right, and I will post another video probably Thursday, giving you some practical, hopefully some practical pointers about how to grow in your prayer life over the summer. Okay, so have a great night, and until then.